Hey everyone, in this video we'll be building a card UI using Flexbox. The cards are going to be responsive and we'll jazz it up a little bit by adding some cool hover effects. Sound good? Let's get into it. Alright, so we have our code editor, VS Code open, and let me walk you through the files that we'll be working with. So first things first, index.html. It's blank, we haven't really gotten to this yet. Then we have an app folder that is going to contain all our styles in the style.scss folder. We have a dist folder that will have our compiled CSS file. Then we have an image folder which has images that we'll be using in our website. And the other folders and files that we have are related to our workflow. So I use Gulp and Browser Sync to compile my Sass files to CSS and also to run a local server. If you want to learn more about how to set all that up, you can check out my previous video on Gulp and Browser Sync. You can obviously use whatever method you prefer to compile your Sass to CSS files, but that's just what I use here. So let's get started with that. So I'm going to type in Gulp to run Gulp. This is going to compile Sass files and also open a local server using Browser Sync. So it's blank because there isn't really anything there yet, but we'll get to that as we continue building our website. You can also get all the source code for this project at my GitHub repo, and it's linked down in the description below. So let's get started on this project. In our index.html file, we'll start off by using the Emmet shortcut to add some boilerplate. Then we'll just add title Flexbox cards, and we want to load our CSS file. So this is going to be coming from the dist style.css file. So when we have a grid of cards, I want to sort of enclose all the cards in a parent element. So I'm just going to use section, give it a class of cards, and then in the section tag, I'm going to just add one card for now, and then we'll sort of copy and paste it to get the other ones once we think it's pretty much right. Now, with these card grids, a lot of times are used for, blog posts or other links to pages on your website. So we want really the whole card to be clickable. This means we're going to make the card itself a anchor tag to be a link. So we'll say a link. We'll just have a little hashtag there. And oh yeah, we want to give it a class of card. So in the card, we're going to add the different elements. So I first want to do the image. So it's going to be card underscore image for the image. And then I'm going to do card title, because the title's next, card snippet for the little blurb, and then at the bottom it's going to be the read more. So I'm just going to say card read more, and that doesn't have to be a link because the whole card's already a link, and you don't really want to nest multiple links in one another. Okay, so this is the basic markup for our card. So now let's go in and add the image and then the text in the card. So in the image, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use an image tag. I'm going to use a background image, and I'm loading it in inline styles, which I know you may have heard is not good practice, which is true. But if we're thinking about this card, let's say for a website, you are using a CMS like WordPress or whatever to load the data, you need to have the image itself in the markup so the CMS knows where to load it. Because you're assuming that these cards may change, and if your website's pulling the most recent 10 posts, it's not always going to be the same, so you can't really set that stuff in the styles itself. So this is why I'm using an inline style tag, and then the background image is just so it will be a little more responsive. And that's going to come from the image folder, and in the image folder they're all called landscape. So we'll start with landscape 1. JPEG. Okay, so in the title, so if we check out that first image, it's like a fall woods kind of thing. So we'll make up a title, best place to travel in the fall. And then for the snippet, that's just going to be, a little blurb from the beginning of your blog post usually. So I'm going to use some lorem ipsum. So lorem times 1 for one sentence. And I don't know if I really need all of that. So let's wrap that using the Alt-Z shortcut. So maybe just here I'll cut it off. End it with an ellipsis. And then the read more, we'll just say read more. Okay, so here is the markup. So let's start adding our styles. Now, the first thing we had was we had that cards section to contain all the cards. And then each card will have a class of card. And then we have in that card __ title. And the ampersand is a Sass thing. So the ampersand just means it'll inherit the card class. So this is how this will be card __ title. Actually, __ image comes first, so I'll add that first. So we have title, then we have snippet. Lastly, we have read more. So here's our styles, just kind of stubbed out here. So let's start adding some basic styles to our card. So the card, we want it to have a white background. And then I guess we'll make the color black. And I also want some rounded corners. So we'll say border radius, and we'll just set 5 pixels. Doesn't have to be super round. And I'm also going to add a box shadow, I think. So box shadow, let's see, 3 pixels. I'll show you what this means in just 1 second. So this is what I worked out beforehand. So in the box shadow, the first parameter is going to be horizontally where the shadow is positioned in relation to the element itself. So setting it to 3 pixels will make it a little bit to the right. Then the 2 pixels is the vertical positioning, so it's going to be 2 pixels down. And the third parameter of 14 pixels is the, I think it's called like the range or the spread of the shadow. So the lower the number, it'll just be a very solid line. So the higher the number, it's going to be more sort of gradually, progressively changing into the shadow color. And the last parameter is the color of the shadow. So we're having a sort of dark gray color, and we're setting the opacity to 40%. So we are using Flexbox for these cards. So what I'm going to do is we have in the card, we have the image, title, snippet, read more. So I'm going to make it a flex parent. Now, since everything is vertical, we need to set the flex direction to column. Otherwise, it'll be horizontal, which isn't really what we're looking for. Okay, so let's see what we got so far. We need to get rid of that underline. Since it's a link, we don't want the underline to be there. So we want the image to show up, and what I need to do is actually set the image height. Now, since it is a flex element, we are not going to use height, but rather we're going to use the flex property. And since it's a column direction, the flex property is going to control the height of each of the elements, as well as their positioning. So image, flex, we want the image to be, let's see, maybe 250 pixels or so tall. And we don't really want it to grow, and we don't want it to shrink in height. So I'm going to say flex grow is going to be 0, flex shrink is also going to be 0, and flex basis is going to be 250 pixels. And the flex property is the shorthand for flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. Okay, so let's see what we got now. Ooh, yeah, because now we have our image. It's actually a little taller than I think it needs to be. 250. I guess 250 is a little bit too tall. Let's try 150. That's maybe 120. I think 120 seems pretty good. 120 pixels. And just for the sake of not having the card going all the way across, let's set a max width on it. So max width maybe 450 pixels. There we go. All right, so that's a little more card-like, right? Now this image I think needs to, yeah, we want the image to cover the area. So we'll say background size, cover, and background repeat, no repeat, background position, we'll just do center. Okay. Let's see, why is that not? Oh, I'm sorry, I added it to the card property itself. That's not what we want. There we go. Okay, so now we can see a little bit more of the fuller picture, which I think is better. So let's add some of the text styles. So the title wants to be a little bigger than the rest of the text, so let's say 1.75 rems. And also font weight of bold, which is 700. And for the snippet, we'll just say, actually let's set a default font size on the card itself, and then it'll be inherited by the snippet and the read more. Let's just say 1 rem, 16 pixels. There we go. That looks pretty getting there, right? For the read more, I think I'm going to make it uppercase. So text transform, uppercase. All right, there we go. Okay, let's add a little bit of spacing here too. So I'm going to add some space under the title and maybe also under the snippet. So we'll do that with the margin bottom. I'll just say 1.5 rems. So I think that's 45 pixels. Then under the snippet, margin bottom, maybe the same 1.5 rems. Okay, maybe a little bit too much spacing. Okay, 0.5 rems. I'll do that for both. There we go. Okay, we're getting there. So I think this is okay. There are a couple things I want to do. I want to add padding in here, and I also want to make the read more be on the right side. So I can't add padding to the card itself, because if I do that, it's gonna add space around the image, which I obviously don't want. And the padding needs to be for the text, for title, snippet, and read more. So I think one thing I can do is, in our markup, I'm going to put the title, snippet, and read more in another parent element. So class, card, we'll just say content. And in the card content, we'll move the title, snippet, and read more. That way they'll be able to all take the same padding. So let's add another style set of style rules for card content. We'll do it under image. I try to just make my style rules sort of follow the order in the markup. Makes it a little bit easier to find styles later on if you have to change stuff. So we'll just say padding of 1 rem to start off. Here we go. Much better spacing. I think I'm going to add some maybe padding to the body just so we have a little space around the cards. Or actually, maybe I'll add that to the cards parent. There we go. All right, looks like the border radius is not taking on the top, so I can fix that with a overflow hidden. So this means content will be clipped. So this will make the border radius apply to the image as well. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's now copy this card that we have. And I'm going to duplicate it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, so we have 5 cards. So let's update the image. So let's see, this is the first one. So we'll make this landscape 2, landscape 3, landscape 4, landscape 5. Okay, here we go. So the copy's all the same. We'll experiment with some different copy in a little bit, but let's just make the cards have that grid layout that we wanted. So we're gonna use Flexbox for this as well. So what I'm gonna do is in the cards element, I'm gonna say display flex. Okay, so by default, what happens when you set something to display flex is it will put all the child elements in that element in one row by default, unless you sort of specify otherwise. So this is a little tight, right? And also if you keep getting narrower and narrower, obviously this doesn't look very good. So we can fix that by saying flex wrap. This will allow the flex children to wrap onto multiple rows if need be. And also I'm going to use a new property here, gap, 1.5 rems. This is going to add spacing. There we go. Looks like we have an error here, but I think it's okay. I think there's just some weirdness when I'm using this gap property because it's still kind of new, but it seems to be working in the website itself, so I think we're okay. Okay, so now it is wrapping, and this is just kind of an intelligent wrapping thing. It's not really responsive, because ideally you'd want the cards to sort of change with the width. I think I need to set a flex property on the card itself too. So instead of a max width of 450, or I'll add a flex of, let's say, the minimum I want these cards to be is about 300 pixels, so I'll allow it to grow. I really don't want it to shrink less than 300 pixels, and the flex basis or the default will be 300 pixels. And then the width will be capped at 450 pixels. So let's try that again. All right, there we go. So now, this is happening because of this. So to fix this sort of gap here, I'm going to center the cards. So I can do that in the cards parent. I will say justify content center. Okay, so now it's centered. So you can see as I change, it looks pretty good. And this, the cool thing about this is that we didn't have to use any media queries to make this responsive layout. We were letting Flexbox decide how wide the cards are going to be and where they're going to fit. So they'll keep getting wider and wider until either they hit 450 or there's enough space to add another card column. So here it starts at 450. As you get more and more space, you can finally fit 2 cards at about 300 pixels wide. And as you keep getting more and more width, it'll keep growing until you can fit 3 cards. So that's kind of how this will go. So if you have a really wide screen, you could probably fit all 5 cards in one row. Let's make the copy a little bit different, just to test what the cards will look like and how they'll behave when the copy is different. And I think that's one thing that's really important when you're working in a real world setting, because a lot of times you'll get a design and it'll just have sort of the ideal text, meaning all the titles will be, you know, just 1 line or all 2 lines. Snippets could all be the same number of lines as well. So you won't encounter any problems that you might otherwise when the copy does eventually change when we use this for real. So let's make some of the descriptions shorter and some of them longer. So let's make this one longer. So I'll say lorem times 1. This is going to be more lines, I think. And then let's make this one shorter. And, you know, again, this is just good things to test, just so you have fewer changes later on, you know, after your website's launched and stuff. And we'll just kind of like randomly do some stuff here. We'll make one even longer. Maybe not that long, but let's try that. And maybe we should test some titles as well. So, okay, we can see now the cards look different. This one is a mountain picture, so let's say, how about mountains? And then let's make this next card, card 3, a bit longer as well. And what's that? It's like a lake with flowers. The most breathtaking view you will ever see. So we're trying to force this title into 2 lines. There we go. Oh, I changed 4 instead, but you know, it doesn't matter too much. So now that we can see how these cards look with different size of content, we can immediately see that there's some things that maybe don't look great. So for example, this read more link, it's just kind of following, you know, wherever the snippet ends. I might actually make the read more bold just because. Font weight 700. There we go. So you can just see it a little bit more easily. The problem is, what we want, I think, is to make the read more be at the bottom no matter what. So let's check out this one specifically. If we hover over the card content, we can see that card content is go all the way down to the bottom. So to make read more at the bottom, we need the card content to go all the way down to the bottom as well. So I think what we can do is set the height of the content to 100%. There we go. So now at least the parent is going to go all the way down to the bottom. And the reason it's taller is because this card has more copy. So in Flexbox, it makes all the child elements the same height by default. And I think you can change that if you want, but by default, they will be the same height, which I think is a good thing. Okay, so let's set this height to 100. Okay, yeah. Now, how do we make this read more go all the way down to the bottom? Well, we can actually use Flexbox for that as well. So one cool trick with Flexbox is if you set the margin, so we want the margin above the read more to be, variable width, however long it needs to be to put read more at the bottom, you can say margin top of auto. And, didn't work. Oh, I need to set the card content to be flex as well. Okay, so let's do that. So card content, display flex. And it's also going to be flex direction column. There we go. So now this margin top auto thing should work. There we go. Okay, so we have our basic flex layout working pretty well. It's responsive and everything. Let's add a little hover state or active state to the cards. So what I want to happen is when we hover over one of the cards, it'll sort of bump up just a little bit, and maybe the box shadow will increase. I think I need to actually make the box shadow a little bit of a lighter color. I think it's blending into the background a little bit too much. So let's add this hover state, and it's going to be on the card element itself. So ampersand hover, and for hover, to move it up, we'll say transform translate Y, and let's see, we'll just move it up like -1 rem, so about 16 pixels. And then we also need to add the transition to the regular non-hover state. So transition, we'll transition the transform property, and we'll say 200 milliseconds and ease in out. I tend to just default to ease in out for my easing. That's kind of the speed at which the animation will happen. All right, check that out. Yeah. Let's now adjust the shadow. So I think we'll say 255, 255, 255, that's white. And let's just make it a 20% opacity. So maybe when we hover, the box shadow will also increase. So let's take this. So also I think we'll just make this transition to be on all properties. So that'll include transform and box shadow. So if we want the glow to sort of increase a little bit, maybe we'll increase the opacity to 4, and we can increase the range of it, or I can't remember what it's called, how far out it's gonna go. So let's try that and see how that looks. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of it'll make the glow a little bit more on the bottom. So we'll make this 3 and we'll move this down to 2. Yeah, so we can see it increasing. It's just a little subtle effect. We don't need to go overboard. But I think we can pretty much consider this project done. We have the responsive stuff. This looks good no matter what size you're on. Has this, fun little hover states. And we have the read more always at the bottom, which is generally a good thing. All right. And that's it for building a card UI using Flexbox. Do you want to see me build a similar card UI using CSS Grid? Let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd like to see in a future video. And as always, thanks for watching and keep on coding.